All right, folks, we're at the top of page 218. We just finished up master pages, and we're now moving to a concept called a base page. And a base page is kind of a weird construct because you would think that most of the stuff that we would want to do, we could do with a master page. But there are some things that we need additional capabilities to be able to do. Um, for example, they're giving a little oversight here in this graphic showing how if we generate a web page based upon the system defaults, the system will look to a library, and they indicate it right here. When we generate a page, it goes to this library, and those of you learning objects and classes right now in Java, it's basically inheriting capabilities from a class file. And for many intents and purposes, the code that goes with that, is useful for most situations. But what if you're building a really big website and you find that you have some capabilities that that default page doesn't have that you would like all your pages to have? So what you do is you end up coming up with a base page which still inherits from that master page, not master page, but the system page, and then also allows us to create the web page underneath so that every time we create one, it will always have that capability included that goes beyond what was originally available in the system level page. So that is kind of a useful thing to know. All right. They talk here a little bit about what they call the page life cycle. And this is really something that you think about when you're working at a browser and you type in a URL or you click on a link, and then what happens in the background, right? So the first thing that people usually do is they'll either type an address or click a link, and then that sends a request to the server. So it sends out, it says, hey, I want this page. It goes to the server and it says, this is what the person's looking for, and then let's get that up on the screen. But some things happen in between those steps. And one thing is it goes into this mode called start. So it gets, as it says here, access to certain properties that are used before we actually get to the page. So in some cases, it'll run a snippet of code. Most often that'll be what it is, before it actually sends the page back. The page itself will have a couple of modes. And notice the keywords that they're highlighting here, where there's a pre-init. In other words, before the page actually initializes, we might execute some code. And then when we actually are initializing the page initialization also has three different modes. The initialization, the completed initialization, and then a preload. So in other words, it does stuff before it even loads. Now, if you're asking yourself, why is this important? Basically, we can attribute coding actions to any one of those states. So we might not run a script until the page is completely loaded, or we might run a script before the page loads, or while it's loading, or before it even thinks about loading. So you see, like, we have all these insertion points that we can attack to drop in code. We don't really typically think about that a lot at this level of coding, but when you get to more complicated scenarios, you do think about those things. You think about, well, I'm going to load up the page, but hold on a second, is this person logged in? When do you want to check that? After the page shows up on the screen? No, you do that before, right? So that's that kind of scenario. There's also these spots here. The page is loaded. Remember and it says here, remember we were working with that drop-down list? The page is loaded. Once the page is loaded, then we can allow that drop-down list to trigger the events that it does. And what it does is it does like callbacks to the server. Validation is another one of those things that happens kind of automatically like that, in terms of you drop in content, it recognizes that it's not valid, and it reacts to you immediately, right? We also have the post back, and that's actually when the information is getting sent back to the server for processing, and that's whether the page reloads or not. There's an interaction going on there. There's also the rendering phase where it actually draws it into the browser, and then the unload phase where it exits the browser. So you can actually write code that when you're leaving the page, it triggers. So for all of those different modes, we can look at those things. But that's kind of the life cycle of the page as well, when you think about how that goes through things. All right, let's take a look at how we would implement a base page for ourselves. And there are some things in here that will be a little bit new for you. We are going to have to dig into some areas of your system. I'm going to give you guys a fair warning here for those of you that are working on school machines. When you do create a base page here, base pages like to reside in specific folders on your machine that on a shared machine like this, school machines, you're not going to be able to maintain, right? If you're working on your own machine, it'll always stay in that spot and you can always call upon it. But you need to know that if you create it here in class, that you have to manually grab that file and take it with you, email it, Google Drive it, whatever it is that you do, flash drive, whatever. But you will have to keep a copy of that. And then when you work on a different machine, you'll need to know which folder to put it into to make it work again, because it does have a default folder. So I'm telling you all that kind of up front. All right, but we're going to go into the project now. We're going to go to the app code folder, and we're going to give it a right click, and we're going to add a new item. And then it says that we need to select a base page. We're going to choose class as our type, because this is basically going to be a code page. That's what it's going to be. And we're going to name it base page. And just go ahead and click add, and you can see that it drops it in right up here. In step 2, they give us some C# code, so I'm just going to pull that back over so you can watch me gloriously copy paste. And I want you to be mindful of the fact that it says clear the contents of the file and basically replace it with the following code. So this is going to have to be in increments here. So I'm going to grab the first part. I'm going to remove all of this stuff. And we're going to come back and grab the rest. And then I'm going to do a Control-S to save. All right, so next thing it says is save the file and close it. It's already saved. I guess I'll close it since it told me to. And then it says open the login page, which should still be open, and open its code behind file. So we're going to go to login and then the C# file that comes down off of it. And then we're going to change its inherit code. Now this little symbol here, notice how we were talking about that system level code page that we pull from automatically? We're going to change it so what comes after this colon is going to be our base page. So I'm just going to type base page. Notice how the project automatically recognizes it's there, right? Because it looks in our own app code folder automatically. So instead of inheriting from the system level page, we're inheriting from our page. Being mindful of the fact that the base page itself is inheriting from system. It's using the system library already. So we're not losing that connection to the system library. It's just being funneled through base page to get there. It's a class inheriting from a class. All right, go ahead and Control S and save that one too. All right, this next step wants us to go to the login page and try to pull it up in the browser. All right, so instead of just launching the whole project, I'm going to right-click on Login ASPX and View in Browser. And of course, it goes to the other screen, and it's giving it a message, giving us a message. And really, this is playing off of the example in the book. And they're telling us that the page title cannot be untitled paged or an empty string. The system level page automatically titles it. Ours doesn't. That's why we're getting this error message. The error message is expected, by the way, so you're not doing anything wrong. It's exactly what's supposed to happen here. Did any of you get, instead of that error screen, did anybody get the code, the C# code, pop up in your browser? Okay, good. All right. Now they want us to go back into Visual Studio here to the HTML version of the page, right, which has like hardly any HTML in it. And then up here at the top, notice how the title is blank? We're going to type in the title. Log in to Planet Rocks. Once again, save your work. And then it wants us to go ahead and repeat steps 3 and 5, which is drop in that inherits code, this thing, and a title on every page on the site that is attached to that master page. So watch what I do here. The default page, the title, what should we call this one? Planet Rocks, maybe? I'm just thinking of something clever. The code behind file that goes with the default page. What do we need to do here? That's got to say base page. Anything else that we needed to do? Well, let's go here and look. Oh, that's it. Save it. Now if we go ahead, and I'm pausing myself here because I'm reading the next set of instructions, if you're wondering. If you're curious here in step 6, they're also pointing out that if you had a whole bunch of pages that you were going to change this on, you can just use the find and replace feature, where it'll locate all the pages that have that change that needs to be made. I'm not going to demonstrate that. I'm sure you guys can figure that out. But you can do a replace all. So if you were working on a real large project where, let's say, you had 100 pages, seems like a lot, but it really isn't if you have a big application, you could do that all in one fell swoop. So that's kind of a handy step. Assume that's all okay. All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead again and launch the application. This time we'll just launch it with the default play button there. And it is going to go to the main page, and then we should be able to go to the login page. And then please pay attention to what's in the tab, how the title did actually go. And if you were able to do that, then you have succeeded at this point. All right, so they go through now and they start to tell us, you know, how the base page works and what's going on with it. And I'm kind of racing ahead here, I know. But we're getting to the section now where we are going to create some templates that we could actually reuse. So this is kind of a fun little piece. All right, we're going to now add another page to the site, and this is going to be a temporary page. So we're just going to do a right-click, add web form. Is it going to be based on the master page? Yeah, so let's do it this way instead. So choose web form. Make sure that you are selecting a master page. They want us to call it temporary. Choose your master page. Then they want us to go ahead and open up the code behind file for this page. And then once again, we're going to go in to that code behind file, and we're going to change the page inheritance to base page like we did before. So it's pulling off of our page, which is pulling off the system page. And we also want to rename the class from temporary to this really cryptic looking string that you're going to copy and paste from the book, which looks like this. Now these are all kind of basically special little directives which are going to allow us to use this as a template. Now notice it is throwing errors, right? But it wants to make sure that we don't remove any of the existing code. So don't remove anything else that's there, just make that adjustment. Don't worry about the errors right now because we haven't made accommodations for these things yet, so they will cause errors. Go ahead and save your work. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that'll be uncomfortable for you at first when you're kind of a beginning coder is sometimes you'll create stuff and it's throwing errors and your instinct is to try to fix those errors right away. But if you know that you're going to do other changes subsequently that are going to resolve those errors, don't go rushing in to fix errors that you know you're going to fix yourself later. So some of that, I think, comes from a little bit from experience. All right, so they want us to switch to markup view, so they want us to go to the page itself. And we want to change the inherits attribute to the same thing we just changed it in the code file. So I'm just going to paste that in here, the same little snippet. All right, so it should look something like this. Go ahead and save your work. Still flagging an error here, but it's still okay. All right, make sure everything is saved. Remember that we're doing some temporary work here, and I know that seems like we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but not really. All right. All right, if you've got everything saved, the next instruction, step number 5 on page 226 says to go to File, choose Export Template, and then from this screen, we're not going to choose the whole project as a template. We're just going to choose one particular item, the thing that we just created. Lets you pick the project and the language that you're using. Go ahead, click Next. And then it says put a check mark in front of the file that we just created. Click Next. All right, so here it says click item references, and notice that what it's trying to do is pull from all these various system libraries that you can pull in, so you can make sure that certain components attach to the file correctly if you need them. So in other words, if you have certain like code files, the book is calling them assemblies, DLL files, this allows you to maintain those references. All right. For us, there's no concerns here because we really don't have anything here that we're pulling from, so we're just going to say next. We're going to call the template my base page. And if you want to type in some descriptive text, you can, and then go ahead and click finish. You can see what happened here is it created a zip file. Guess what that zip file contains? That page. Take notice as to where that's being stored. It by default puts it in your documents folder, Visual Studio, whatever version you're using, and my exported templates. So if you guys are working on these school machines, that's where the file went. You want to take that file with you, you got to go there and get it. And notice it is a zip file. All right, well that completes step 8. Now we're on step 9. Step 9 says back in Visual Studio here, we can go ahead and actually delete this temporary file. We just used our project as kind of a vehicle for creating it, is what happened. And then it says, then right-click the website, the root of the site, choose Add New Item, and it says that if you notice now, somewhere inside here, one thing that you might want to do here is hit refresh for the project so that when we add that, it hopefully will show up. If it still doesn't show up, and you're right, mine's not showing up. Yeah, and it's not pulling it up. So we will actually have to shut the project down to do it. So just go ahead and do that. Save anything that needs saving. Come on back and open it up. And now when we try to add that page, hopefully, there it is. Okay, so that's pulling up from that project template folder. So you got to make sure you grab that zip file and take it with you. And that remember where it was located in the file system, so when you put it in your own machine to do the work, you can find it, because otherwise it will not pull up. All right, so it wants a new page name, and it says test page. And then go ahead and click add. And then when you take a look at that test page, and you look at the code behind file, notice what happened in this spot here, how it changed the name of the page, put an underscore in front of it, because it is being actually renamed by virtue of that really cryptic looking string that we put in. That was really a little directive that made it do this. It's telling us that basically that we're pulling it from that structure. All right. The funny thing about all of what we just did is we don't need this page on the site, so you can now delete it if you want, or you can leave it. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to be actually use. But now you can see that if you wanted to do something like this, you have that capability where you can create reusable components like this and pull them into your project.